We're looking at verse number 2 of 21st chapter of 2 Samuel. Verse 2 says, So the King David, called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. The children of Israel had sworn to protect them. But Saul sought to kill them in his zeal for pleasing the people of Judah. New Living Translation says that Saul tried to wipe out the Gibeonites. I want to use for a subject real quick, I'm still here. I'm still here. At the time of our text, David is now king of Israel, and he has been waiting for a long time to become king. God has promised him, God has anointed him to be king of Israel, and now he's finally come into the promise that God has given him. But now that he is king of Israel, now there's a famine in the land. And this famine has been going on for 3 long years. It's interesting that now that David has walked into the promise of God, there's a problem connected to it. That helps somebody, because many times when we get a promise from God, we believe that no problem is associated with it. But we see right here in the text that just because God promises us something doesn't mean that a problem will not be part of the promise. You're saved. God promised you salvation to give you eternal life, but then problems start coming in your life and you believe that something is wrong. No, there's nothing wrong. What goes on is a problem is simply connected to the promise. So David has a famine in the land, and this famine isn't even his fault. He goes to God and he prays to God, and God is so good, so gracious that he answers David's prayer. And he tells David, the reason this famine is going on in the land, it isn't because you've done something wrong. It isn't even because the children of Israel have sinned before me. But the king before you, Saul, is the one that sinned. He killed the Gibeonites. There was a pact. There was a treaty. There was not supposed to be any battling between the children of Israel and the Gibeonites. And because Saul, in his zeal for being a people pleaser, since he killed the Gibeonites, that's why you're going through this famine. Many times, isn't it strange that I'm going through something that ain't even my fault? This is what David is going through. He's going through something, and the children of Israel are going through something, and it isn't even their fault. So David has to right the wrong that Saul created. So he goes to the Gibeonites, and he tries to right this wrong with them so the famine can be lifted off of the people of Israel. And while he's talking to the Gibeonites, I can just imagine in my spiritual imagination that the Gibeonites are telling David how Saul came in and began to slaughter their families and stab them and hang them and do all this crazy stuff to them. But after they say all that to David, I can hear them saying this: I'm still here. David, he came in and began to kill us, but we're still here. Some of my family members are not here anymore, but I'm still here. There's a famine in the land, but I'm still here. Food is scarce, but I'm still here. My car is raggedy, but I'm still here. My mortgage is due, but I'm still here. My rent needs to be paid, but I'm still here. It's hard for me to keep the bills paid, but I'm still here. Family members have left me, but I'm still here. Confusion is in my life, but I'm still here. I don't understand what God is doing in my life, but I'm still here. And because I'm still here, the least I can do is give God the praise. Lord, I don't understand what's going on in my life, but I still praise you. Lord, some things are going down in my life, but I can still praise you. I'm in the valley right now, Lord, but I still give you the praise. And not only, Lord, am I still here physically, but I'm still committed to you, Lord. I'm still here in your word. I'm still here in my prayer closet. I'm still here fasting. I'm still in church. I'm still witnessing. I'm still loving you. I'm still doing what you called me to do. Lord, I'm still here. I'm still here. And before I leave, I want to let us know that I'm not the only one that's still here. You're not the only one that's still here. Because Jesus wanted me to tell you that, lo, I will be with you always, even until the end of the world. I want you to know I will never leave you, never forsake you. I'm still here with you. When you were going through that mortgage mess up, I was with you. When your job downsized, I was right there with you. When you were deep in sin, I was right there with you. I know you're struggling right now, baby, but I'm right there with you. Jesus is still here with us. And you know what got me excited? This is what got me excited as I go to my seat. Jesus was on the cross, and they put nails in his hand and nails in his feet, and he's racking in pain. And they began to ridicule him, and they said, Jesus, won't you come down from the cross? And I know Jesus didn't say this with his mouth, but I can imagine in his mind, he was saying, no, I'm still here. I'm going to hang on this cross because Kente's sin needs to be cured. I'm going to stay on this cross because friendship sin need to be taken care of. I'm still here, baby, because I have to die for the world. I have to do what God called me to do. I got to bring souls into the kingdom. I'm still here. Bless you on the day, friendship. And I thank God for one thing. I'm still here.